June 11th, 1944, just after 1600 hours, a narrow sunbeam cuts through the drifting gun smoke over the wheat fields west of Le Mesnil-Patry. The air is thick with cordite, dust, and the burnt oil stench that every tanker learns to fear. Corporal Evan McLeod, Royal Canadian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, RCEME, sprints across the verge of the Caen Road with a toolkit clattering against his thigh. He hears the clank of ruptured armor cooling, the hiss of burning rubber, and then the sound that makes every Sherman crew go rigid, a muffled whoomph inside the hull, followed by a pillar of black smoke. McLeod curses under his breath. It's the third Sherman in his brigade to ignite that day, and each time the same damned weakness, a hit that severs or bursts the exposed fuel line running near the engine block, turning a survivable penetration into a funeral pyre within seconds. Ahead of him, a Sherman fee from the 6th Armored Regiment, 1st Hussars, is half sunk into a ditch, turret frozen. Escape hatches flung open. 2 crewmen are dragging their gunner out by the webbing straps, boots scraping the dirt. Flames flicker below the rear hull, licking upward, fed by a broken line hemorrhaging gasoline. "Fire bottles!" someone yells. "They're empty!" McLeod doesn't hesitate. He dives toward the engine deck, covering his face from the heat. He hears the rounds cooking off deeper inside the cabin. Single sharp snaps that could come from anywhere. With a crowbar, he pries the access panel open, smoke bursting outward like a living thing. There it is, a fuel line glowing red, bubbling, flexing like a serpent ready to spit fire. The engine compartment was never meant to withstand this kind of shrapnel pattern. Normandy hedgerows concealed Panzer IVs at point-blank ranges the Canadians never trained for in England. They were fighting in a lethal maze, and every Sherman that took a glancing hit risked turning itself into a furnace. McLeod reaches in through the smoke, clamps the line with a wrench, and yanks it hard enough to nearly rip his glove. He shouts over his shoulder, "Get me asbestos wrap, anything, a tarp, sandbags, now!" Private Louis Charon appears with a crate of emergency supplies. McLeod grabs a length of heat-resistant insulation, the kind they normally used on exhaust manifolds, and begins spiraling it around the torn section. But he can feel the heat, absurd heat, radiating through. The Sherman is seconds from going up. The tank commander, still coughing from the fumes, watches with wide eyes. "Forget it, Corporal! She's done! Fall back before she blows!" McLeod ignores him. He tightens the clamp, reroutes a section of the line farther from the ruptured engine plate, and shouts, "Try her now!" The driver, trembling, slick with sweat, reaches inside the hatch and hits the switch. The engine coughs, sputters, catches. A low, even roar hums through the ground. The tank hasn't died. More importantly, it hasn't burned. McLeod staggers back as the flames along the hull gutter out, starved of fresh gasoline. For a long moment, nobody speaks. The only sound is the rattle of distant MG-42 bursts somewhere south toward Bretteville. Finally, the commander mutters, "How the hell did you do that?" McLeod wipes oil from his face. "That line's vulnerable, too exposed. If we wrap it, reroute it slightly lower and away from the manifold, it might keep them from cooking off every time the Germans sneeze." Charon blinks. "Sir, is that regulation?" McLeod snorts. "Regulation? Out here? If it keeps your tank from turning into a stove, yes, it's regulation. Starting now." A nearby lieutenant overhears. "Can you do that to the rest of C Squadron?" "If you bring them to me, or bring me to them, I'll do every single one before first light." And so, in a dusty Norman orchard that smelled of sap and death, a Canadian mechanic knelt beside a burning Sherman and created the fix that would spread through an entire armored brigade before the week was out. A jerry-rigged rerouting, a field-expedient insulation technique, a crude, desperate idea, but one that would save dozens of tanks and hundreds of men. But McLeod has no time to celebrate his accidental ingenuity. As he gathers his tools, a runner skids to a halt, panting. "Corporal! Another Sherman! Hit on the road to Nori! Fuel line again! They're trapped in there!" McLeod slings his toolkit over his shoulder. "All right," he mutters, running toward the thunder of guns. "Let's go save another one." June 12th, 1944, 0510 hours. Dawn creeps over Normandy like a reluctant promise, pale gray light spilling through the apple branches of a battered orchard north of Nori-en-Bessin. Every tree bears shrapnel scars. The ground is churned mud, and in the middle of this ruined garden, Corporal Evan McLeod kneels beside yet another Sherman, sleeves rolled, fingers black with oil and gasoline. It is the fifth tank he has worked on since midnight. Behind him, the battered silhouettes of Shermans from the 10th Armored Regiment, the Fort Garry Horse, are parked in a makeshift line, engines off, hatches open, crews sitting on overturned ammo crates drinking cold tea. They watch the mechanic as if he's some kind of battlefield surgeon. Inside the latest Sherman, a gunner sits on the turret floor, trembling hands wrapped in a blanket. He had nearly burned alive 3 hours earlier. The Germans had bracketed the column with armor-piercing HE. A single fragment sliced the tank's fuel line. Flames had roared up the bulkhead within seconds. Only a frantic scramble through the commander's hatch saved him. Now he stares at McLeod with red-rimmed eyes. "Why does this keep happening?" the gunner whispers. McLeod doesn't answer immediately. He pulls the damaged line free, turning it in the pale light. A glossy burn mark runs the length of the tubing, close enough to the manifold that heat alone could have ignited it, even without a hit. This isn't just bad luck. This is design vulnerability meeting Normandy reality. He sets the damaged section down and finally replies, voice low, because the Sherman was built for speed of production, not perfection, and because out here, he gestures around at the hedgerows, still echoing with distant artillery, the Germans get too damn close. Nearby, Lieutenant Hugh McLeary approaches, maps tucked under his arm. He has the tired eyes of a man who hasn't slept in 2 days. "Corporal," he says, "Brigade HQ wants to know if your, what did you call it, reroute and wrap, can be applied to the entire 2nd Canadian Armored Brigade." McLeod wipes sweat from his forehead with a grease-blackened sleeve. "To the whole brigade?" He lets out a breath. "Sir, that's nearly 100 Shermans." "Yes," McLeary replies, "and we need them done yesterday." A distant boom rolls over the orchard, an 88mm shell impacting somewhere south. Birds scatter from the few unbroken branches. The crews look toward the horizon, uneasy. McLeary lowers his voice. "Regimental CO says we lost 7 tanks to fuel line fires in the past 48 hours. Not destroyed by penetrations, not brewed up from ammo, just fires." He pauses. "If your fix prevents even half of those, that changes the battle." McLeod doesn't need convincing. He has seen the charred hulks. He has seen what happens to men when flames race up a Sherman's flank faster than a crew can unbuckle their harnesses. He looks around the orchard. Tank after tank waits like wounded animals. "All right," he says finally, "but I'll need hands, lots of them." "You'll have them," McLeary replies. "We're pulling every RCEME fitter, welder, and grease monkey from here to the beach. You're in charge." McLeod freezes. "In charge? Sir, I'm a corporal." "You are the only man who figured this out under fire. Rank is irrelevant right now." The lieutenant turns and strides away toward Brigade HQ. And suddenly, in the first true light of day, it becomes clear to McLeod that his improvised idea isn't just a field fix anymore. It's becoming doctrine. He returns to the open engine compartment. The metal is cool now. He threads the insulated line through a lower channel, away from the manifold, stabilizing it with clamps scavenged from spare kits, and even a few cut from British carrier parts. It's rough. It's inelegant. But it's safe. Behind him, 2 privates approach carrying a crate marked Urgent, fittings, insulation, A-type tubing. They set it down beside him. "Sir," one of them says, mistakenly, instinctively. "Brigade said you're the one to report to." McLeod huffs a tired laugh. "Don't call me sir. I work for a living." But even he can hear the shift in tone. A mechanic is becoming a leader. By noon, the orchard is transformed into a chaotic RCEME forward workshop. Torches hiss, tools clang, tanks line up and move forward one by one. Mechanics work elbow to elbow, sweat streaking through grime. The sound is like an assembly line dropped into a battlefield. Every hour, a runner arrives. "Sherman immobilized west of Puteaux-en-Bessin, needs reroute. Tank hit near Cristo, fire avoided thanks to your fix. HQ requests a written procedure ASAP." McLeod barely has time to breathe, but amid the noise he hears something remarkable. Something he's never heard before in all the chaos since D-Day. Laughter. Two crewmen sit on the turret of a newly modified Sherman, marveling at the work. "One hit this morning bounced off the hull," one says, "and we waited for the usual flare-up. But nothing." The other slaps the armor. "First time I felt safe in this damn thing." Safe. In a Sherman. The irony isn't lost on McLeod. He doesn't smile, but inside something steadies. They might just keep these men alive long enough to reach Khan. As the sun dips low, the orchard flickers with the glow of lanterns and work lamps. The day's heat fades. A breeze rolls in, carrying the distant rumble of tanks advancing toward Bretteville. McLeod tightens the last clamp on the 6th tank. "Next," he calls. A sergeant approaches instead. "Corporal," he says, "there's a message from Brigade Command. A captured German report mentions Canadian Shermans that refuse to ignite. Seems they've noticed." McLeod straightens slowly. The enemy noticed? Already? The sergeant nods. Word is spreading, fast. McLeod looks down at his grime-covered hands, then at the long row of tanks waiting in the orchard's fading light. Something has changed. Today it is an orchard. Tomorrow it will be a brigade. But for now, there is only one order to give. He picks up his wrench. "Bring me another Sherman." June 14th, 1944. 1840 hours. A low, angry sky hangs over the fields northwest of Bretteville-Lorgueilleuse. Thunderheads crowd the horizon, but the real storm is already underway on the ground. The rumble of tanks, the snap of MG-42 fire, and the distant thud of 88mm guns searching for Canadian armor. In a shallow depression at the edge of a hedgerow, Corporal Evan McLeod stands ankle-deep in mud, watching a long line of Shermans creep past him toward the front. They look different now. Not in silhouette, but in confidence. Every tank in B Squadron has undergone his modification. Insulated lines, rerouted tubing, clamps reinforced with field-welded brackets. A sergeant leans out of a passing turret. "Corporal, your handiwork saved our hides yesterday. Took a hit on the rear quarter. Line held." McLeod gives a tired nod. Praise is fine, but what he needs is proof. Real proof. That the fix works under fire, not just in theory and hope. And he gets that proof sooner than expected. A runner bursts through the hedgerow, panting. "Contact! Panthers engaging C Squadron near Le Haut-du-Bosque. One of ours took a glancing shot to the engine compartment." McLeod's breath catches. A glancing shot. Exactly the kind that used to ignite Shermans like oil-soaked tinder. "Did it burn?" he demands. The runner grins through dirt-smeared cheeks. "No, sir. She's still fighting." For the first time since D-Day, McLeod allows himself a full breath. The fix is working. Not just once. Not just in an orchard under controlled conditions. Under fire. Under chaos. Under the murderous pressure of German 75mm AP and 88mm flak conversions. He tightens his fists to keep them from shaking. Before he can savor the moment, a jeep screeches to a halt beside him. Major Kenneth Blackmore, RCEME brigade officer, jumps out, boots sinking into the mud. "Corporal McLeod!" he barks. McLeod snaps to attention instinctively, though he's still smeared with grease from a half-disassembled transmission. "At ease," the major says. "Corporal, your field modification has now been ordered across the entire 2nd Canadian Armored Brigade." McLeod blinks. "Sir? All 3 regiments?" "All 3. Gary's, Sherbrooke's, and the Hussars. And command wants a written technical procedure by nightfall." McLeod nearly laughs. "Nightfall is in 2 hours. Then you'd better write fast." The major lowers his voice. "Corporal, this is changing our operational survivability. Your work is saving tanks and men." He reaches into his coat and hands McLeod a folded paper. "This came through ultra-intercepted chatter, translated an hour ago." McLeod unfolds it carefully. The German message is terse, clinical, but one line stands out. "Kanadische Sherman brennen nicht mehr wie zuvor." Canadian Shermans no longer burn as before. The enemy has noticed, and they don't like it. McLeod feels a strange swell in his chest. Pride, dread, resolve, all tangled together. He has no time to sort it out. Artillery shakes the ground. A whistle sounds uprange. Mechanics shout orders as more tanks roll in with smoking hulls, engine plates dented from near misses. War doesn't pause for innovation. He and his improvised repair team sprint toward the newest arrival. A Sherman 5 with fresh shrapnel gouges along the rear flanks. The crew is shaken, but alive. That wouldn't have been true 3 days ago. McLeod climbs onto the engine deck and shouts to his team. "All right, same drill. Clamp, wrap, reroute. If you need tubing, cut it from the spare kits or cannibalize it off the wreck in the field." Rain begins to fall. First a drizzle, then a downpour. Water cascades over the tanks, streaking through soot and blood and oil. The orchard had been hot and dusty. This repair post is cold, wet, and miserable. But in some ways, the rain is a blessing. It muffles the smaller fires, cools the hot metal, and hides the Canadians' movements from German observation. A mechanic beside him shivers. "Corporal, we can't keep this up forever." McLeod tightens a clamp with slow, deliberate force. "We don't need forever," he replies. "We just need until we break through to Carpiquet. After that, the Shermans will be in more open country." The mechanic snorts. "Open country? Against Panthers?" McLeod meets his eyes. No tank is invincible, but a tank that doesn't burn, he wipes his hands on his trousers, is a tank that gives its crew a fighting chance. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion rips across the horizon, a brilliant orange bloom lighting up the hedgerow line. Every man flinches. A second later, a radio crackles frantically. "Panther knocked out one of ours. Crew's alive. Tank didn't ignite. Same hit pattern as before. The mod held." There is a moment, brief, fragile, when the whole repair line goes silent. Mechanics stare at one another. Tank crews freeze in place. Even the rain feels like it pauses. And then, slowly, as if shared by every man present, a ripple of cheers spreads through the mud. Not triumphant, not victorious, but relieved, deeply, profoundly relieved. Shermans can die. Shermans can be knocked out. Shermans can be abandoned in mud and smoke. But now, Shermans don't have to burn. McLeod exhales. Rain runs off the brim of his cap. For the first time all day, his shoulders unclench. Major Blackmore steps up beside him. "Corporal," he says quietly, "I hope you realize what you've done." But McLeod only looks at his wrench, scarred, chipped, the wooden handle dark with oil and sweat, and mutters, "Sir, I just fixed what needed fixing." He doesn't know it yet, but within 3 more days, his technique will spread to British armored crews fighting near Tilly-sur-Seulles. Within a week, American liaison officers will be requesting the details. And within 2 weeks, the jerry-rigged Canadian solution will reach tank units operating outside Caen, carrying the rumor that the Canadians figured out how to stop the Shermans from cooking alive. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight there is only rain, and the roar of engines that no longer feed fire. McLeod taps the engine deck. "Next tank," he shouts, and the work goes on. June 18th, 1944, 03:25 hours. The darkness over Grainville-sur-Odon is alive with distant thunder, not from the sky but from artillery, a constant rolling percussion that rattles loose fittings on the skeletal workshop tents of the 2nd Canadian Armored Brigade. The ground is slick with mud churned by tank treads, boots, and dragging stretchers. Inside one of the makeshift workshops, lit by flickering hurricane lamps, Corporal Evan McLeod sits hunched over a folding field table. A half-dozen tools lie scattered between his elbows, surrounding a sheet of oil-stained paper filled with his cramped handwriting and crude diagrams. This is the document Brigade Command demanded. A written procedure for the modification, but it's more than that. This is doctrine being born in real time. He writes with a stubby pencil, RCEME Field Modification Number 14-R, Fuel Line Insulation and Reroute Procedure for M4A4 Sherman, Chrysler Multibank. Notes: procedure viable under field conditions. Use insulation type A as minimum standard. Avoid manifold proximity. Maintain downward routing angle to reduce heat exposure. He pauses, rubbing tired eyes. A mechanic collapses onto a crate beside him. "Corporal, the Brits want copies now. Sherbrooke Fusiliers already distributed your instructions. Even some Yank liaison officers came snooping around." McLeod sighs. "Tell them to wait until it's legible." Before the mechanic can reply, a voice from the tent entrance cuts through the clatter of rain. "Corporal McLeod!" Lieutenant McCleary strides in, uniform soaked, helmet dripping. "We've got a situation. Incoming tanks from the Sherbrooke Fusiliers Regiment. 4 hit, 2 immobilized, 1 nearly brewed up. They want the modification ASAP." McLeod rises instantly. "So we're doing it for other regiments now?" "We're doing it for anyone who asks," McCleary replies. "Word has spread beyond brigade. You started something that's moving faster than the front itself." Outside, engines rumble. Shermans trundle into the repair area, their hulls gouged by shrapnel, their hatches rattling. Crewmen jump out, some limping, others wide-eyed and silent. One of them, a young loader, stumbles toward McLeod. "You're the mechanic, aren't you? The one who keeps our tanks from turning into bloody ovens?" McLeod almost flinches at the praise. "I make them safer," he says, "not invincible." The loader grabs his sleeve. "Sir, my buddy took a hit on the flank. The old way, he'd be cooked. Your fix saved him, saved all of us." He releases McLeod's sleeve and steps back, throat tightening. "Thank you." McLeod opens his mouth to respond, but the words don't come. Gratitude feels strange on a battlefield where days blur together into smoke, blood, and steel. He turns away and focuses on what he understands. Work. "Right," he mutters. "Let's get to it." Within minutes, the workshop explodes into motion. Torches flare. Spare tubing is cut into sections. Insulation is wrapped, clamped, sealed. Men shout over the storm, "Hand me the number 3 clamp! Line's too close to the exhaust. Reroute it lower. Corporal, we're out of asbestos wrap. Use canvas layers soaked in fire retardant. Go! Go!" Despite the frenzy, there is a rhythm to it now. What began as improvisation has become assembly line precision. Each man knows his role. Each tank follows a sequence. The modifications spread like wildfire, tank after tank leaving safer than it arrived. As McLeod works inside the engine compartment of a damaged Sherman, a voice behind him speaks in crisp British tones. "I say, are you Corporal McLeod?" He turns. A major from the British 7th Armored Division stands there, red tabs gleaming faintly in the lamplight. "Yes, sir," McLeod replies cautiously. "What can I do for you?" "I've been informed," the major says, adjusting his spectacles, "that your method of insulating and redirecting fuel lines has significantly reduced catastrophic burnouts under fire." "Yes, sir," McLeod says. "It seems to be holding. We've lost far too many Cromwells and Fireflies to the same vulnerability," the major continues. "I want your full procedure. Tonight. We'll begin trials immediately." McLeod hesitates. "Sir, the procedure isn't polished. It's rough. Battlefield rough." The major gives a weary, knowing smile. "Corporal, rough is the only kind of engineering that survives a war." He taps the tank's hull with his gloved knuckle. "Your idea may save British lives tomorrow. That's all that matters." McLeod nods slowly. "Yes, sir, I'll get you a copy." The major salutes. "Good man." As he leaves, a mechanic mutters to McLeod, "What next? Americans knocking on your door, too?" McLeod snorts. "Wouldn't surprise me." But even as he resumes tightening a clamp, a shadow falls across the hull. A tall American officer stands silently, rain dripping from his tanker's jacket. "You McLeod?" he asks. McLeod looks up. "Yes?" The American extends a hand. "I'm Captain Howard Collins, U.S. 3rd Armored. We heard you figured out how to keep these gasoline guzzlers from blowing sky high." He pats the Sherman. "Care to share with the neighbors?" McLeod shakes his head in disbelief, half amused, half overwhelmed. "Sir, this isn't exactly top-secret Canadian engineering. It's just common sense." Collins grins. "Common sense is in short supply these days." Lightning cracks across the sky, silhouetting a line of tanks waiting to be worked on. The rain intensifies, hammering canvas, steel, and helmets alike. McLeod exhales. "All right, one tank at a time." He crawls back into the engine bay, hands steady, mind sharp. On his right, Canadians work by lantern. On his left, British mechanics observe. Behind them, American officers take notes. His idea, born in a burning orchard, is now crossing national lines. But there is no time to feel proud, only time to keep moving. Because tomorrow, the Canadians attack toward Carpiquet, and every tank needs to be ready. June 25th, 1944. 0710 hours. A low fog clings to the wheat fields east of Carpiquet like a shroud, muffling sound, swallowing silhouettes. Somewhere beyond the haze, German mortars thump rhythmically, shaking the earth beneath the treads of the Shermans, assembling for the coming assault. The airfield ahead, flanked by fortified hangars and bristling 20mm flak, is one of the most heavily defended positions in the Cannes sector. Corporal Evan McLeod stands beside a row of Shermans from the Sherbrooke Fusiliers Regiment, watching crews perform their final checks before rolling into the teeth of the German line. These aren't the same tanks that landed on D-Day. They've been patched, welded, rebuilt, scarred, and improved. Every single one, from the lead Firefly to the rearmost support Sherman, carries McLeod's field modification. A mechanic approaches, wiping sweat from his face despite the morning chill. "Corporal, that's the last one. All 3 squadrons fully insulated and rerouted." McLeod nods. "Good. If any of them take flank hits today, they'll need every advantage they've got." He turns to leave, but stops when he sees a familiar face. Lieutenant McCleary, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes sunken but burning with determination. "McLeod," he says quietly, "you should see this." He leads the corporal toward a battered Sherman 5 parked slightly apart from the others. On its side, a long, jagged scar runs down the upper hull, a fresh hit from the previous night's skirmish. The tank commander, a weathered sergeant with 3 days' worth of dust embedded in his uniform, steps forward. "She took an 88 last night," he says. "Glancing blow. Hit the fuel line's old route." McLeod stiffens. "Old route? Then why didn't—" The sergeant cuts him off with a small, tired grin. "Because we had your mod." He gestures toward the engine deck. "We checked the compartment after the hit. Insulation charred, clamp bent, rerouted lines still intact. No fire, no burn. We kept fighting for another 40 minutes. The commander removes his helmet, rainwater dripping from the rim. "Corporal, without your fix, I'd be charcoal. My boys, too." The words hit McLeod harder than any shrapnel ever could. He manages a quiet reply. "I'm glad you're still here, Sergeant." The commander grips his hand, a brief, fierce handshake, before climbing back into the turret. McCleary watches the exchange, voice low. "This isn't just a mechanical patch anymore, Evan. It's the difference between a tank crew dying in 30 seconds or fighting for 30 more minutes." McLeod doesn't respond. The fog makes everything feel unreal, like the entire world is holding its breath. A roar builds in the distance. Engines revving, treads grinding, Shermans forming into assault columns. The attack on Carpiquet is about to begin. Mechanics scramble to clear the path as tank commanders shout orders. "Mount up! Check radios! Firefly, you're with me on the left! Button up!" A captain waves toward McLeod. "Corporal, once we move out, pull your team back to Brigade HQ. We'll need your line running again as soon as these tanks return." McLeod nods automatically, but his eyes stay fixed on the Shermans rolling forward. Each one a moving steel box containing 4 or 5 men whose lives hinge on decisions he made with a wrench, a roll of insulation, and a gut instinct in a burning orchard. A Sherman grinds past him, the commander saluting with 2 fingers from the hatch. "Thanks for making this crate a little less deadly on the inside, Corporal." McLeod raises a hand but says nothing. As the tanks disappear into the fog, the ground trembling beneath their weight, McLeod finally exhales. The tension drains out of him, leaving him hollow, exhausted, but resolute. Then, a thunderous crack. German artillery slams into the field beyond the hedgerow. Another, and another. The battle for Carpiquet has begun. Minutes later, radio static fills the command tent. Voices bark over the channel. "Contact! Panthers ahead! Left flank taking fire! Lead tank hit! Engine smoking! Wait! No flames! She's still moving! Repeat! Still moving!" That final line freezes every man in the tent. McLeod closes his eyes, listening as the message repeats. "Still moving. Still moving." An RCEME corporal beside him whispers, "That's your work talking, Evan." But McLeod doesn't answer. He just listens, not to words but to the absence of something. No screams of burning crews, no reports of tanks blooming into fireballs, no frantic calls for fire extinguishers that can't possibly arrive in time. Instead, "Sherman holding! Crew alive! Hit taken! Continuing advance!" Across the field, the fog glows faintly orange as tracer fire arcs toward the airfield. But the thick, oily towers of smoke that once marked a Sherman's death are gone. Not a single Canadian tank has burned this morning. And that realization hits harder than any enemy shell. McLeod steps out into the open, rain pattering against his helmet. The fog billows around him. In the distance, the battle rages, a long, grinding push toward the airfield that will cost blood, steel, and courage. But as the first rays of sunlight break through the clouds above Carpiquet, Corporal Evan McLeod feels something he has not felt since the Canadians landed on Juno Beach. Hope. Machine gun chatter rattles the air. Artillery shakes distant hangars. Shermans push forward through fire. And because of a jerry-rigged Canadian field modification, improvised under fire, refined under pressure, and spread across 3 nations' forces, they are not burning. McLeod wipes the rain from his brow, turns to his men, and says the only order that matters now. "All right, boys, back to HQ. When those tanks come home, and they will come home, we'll be ready for whatever they need next." He shoulders his toolkit and steps forward through the mist. The story of the man who saved Canadian Shermans is not over. But today he proved that an idea born in a battlefield orchard can change an entire war.